I'm Kara Franker. I'm the president and CEO of the Monroe County TDC, otherwise known as Visit Florida Keys. And today I have with me Kelly Fountain, who you probably all know and love. She is our data queen. I also have Heidi Barfels, our VP of Marketing and Communication. So thank you so much for the two of you. And then also as a panelist, we have Jean Quinn, our VP of Technology and Partnerships. She's going to be jumping in and helping as needed. Big shout out to Giovanni and the county for setting up the webinar for us today. We appreciate your partnership as always. So without further ado, I did want to start out by acknowledging a tragedy that happened last night in Isla Morada. You might have heard that there was a high school student who passed away in a car accident. We live in such a small community, and so I just want to make sure that maybe we spend just a few seconds in silence, just acknowledging what his family and so many people in our community are going to go through. It's just a parent's worst nightmare. So just a few seconds in silence for that 15-year-old who lost his life last night. Okay, so welcome. We are going to talk about quite a few things today. So I'm going to share the agenda with you. We're going to have an introduction. We're going to talk about kind of the TDC in general, and then we're going to go through two studies that we have that were recently released, and Kelly is going to walk us through those. Please, we want your questions, we want your comments, so feel free to write in the chat, and we'll try to address as many of those as possible. And then we'll do a little bit of future looking as well as we move to the end of this. So, what is the TDC? Maybe many of you know that as you're joining in, but then we might have some folks too, because we've had a lot of people that signed up for this webinar today who aren't quite sure what the TDC is. So it is an advisory board to the Board of County Commissioners. It's established by the Florida statutes. We have 9 members. And then you see on your screen, Key Largo, Tavernier, Isla Morada, Marathon, Big Pine. Where's Key West? We cover the entire Keys. And so I think that's really important as well. I do want to share with you our board members. So these are our valued leaders in our community who are in a position to guide and direct us through this time. And we're so thankful to each of them. This is a volunteer position that they are appointed to, and they spend a lot of time and effort helping us go through the day-to-day business of tourism promotion, events, sponsorships, capital grants, and then all the different pieces of business that follow. So we're very thankful to our board. This is a new graphic. So in what we talk about, what does the TDC do? I think some of these numbers are going to be really important, and I thought at the very beginning we should kind of go through them. So nearly 19,000 jobs in our community are directly supported by visitor spending, and Kelly's going to walk you through this in detail. But another 5,500 jobs are supported by secondary spending of tourism dollars. She'll give you definitions on what that means as well. And then we're looking at a 5.6 increase over previous years of positions that are in the Keys that are directly related to tourism. And then wages, benefits, and proprietor income increased 4.8%, totaling over $1 billion. So there's no doubt that tourism, it's a big deal in our county, as you know. Looking at the spending, so visitors spent $3.5 billion in the year that we studied most recently, which is 2023. 305 million of that is generated by direct travel related tax revenue. And then we're looking at 92.6 million in secondary travel impacts, bringing the tax revenue total to almost $400 million coming into our community. We're looking at a 43% increase in tax revenue since 2019. And then I think this number at the bottom on your right hand of your screen is really important. $11,500. That's the approximate tax savings per local household. So if it wasn't for tourism related spending, each household in Monroe County out of their pockets would have to pay another $11,500. Why is all of that important? Because we feel that it's imperative for the TDC to talk about how our biggest economic driver fuels food on the table for folks in our community, roofs over their head, although they're very expensive. And then of course, that's how our businesses survive. That's jobs that are at stake. So why do we talk about all of that? Well, we should also talk about how do we get our revenue and how is it distributed? So 4%, 4 pennies are what we call them, and then you see that they're divided out. So 2% of those pennies are considered generic, and then you see the percentages. Some goes to administrative, some goes to event-related items, some goes to advertising. And then on the other side, we have our districts. So we have our 5 districts. You've heard DAX. People talk about the DAX 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it's the same thing. So they're allocated to each district based on their own bed tax revenue. Why is it important that you know how this money is generated and how it is spent? And we're going to talk about that. But if anybody wants to scan and get a copy of this so you can it helps you understand kind of the business of what we're doing here, we've got the QR code. And keep your phone handy because we have a lot of QR codes throughout the presentation. So what is the meaning of all of this? It comes back to something that maybe some of you have heard me talk about called destination stewardship. And this is a concept that all tourism marketing organizations who are members of Destinations International are gearing towards. It's the advancement from just going from heads in beds to looking at holistic balance. How do visitors and residents exist in the same community, especially when so much of what we depend on is visitor driven? And so it's this idea of this ecosystem. It's about the quality of life for residents. It's also about the experiences for visitors when they come here. And then yes, it is about the bottom line. So you'll see the 4 pillars here. Economic prosperity and how our businesses perform is still a #1 priority here. But at the same time, we want to look at our residents' quality of life, the social well-being piece of this, as well as environmental conservation and our ecological balance. How do we protect the habitat that surrounds us? And then also respect for our culture and heritage, how we got here, and paying homage to keeping those things, important as we go forward. So as you see the money and the way it comes in, our leadership and who's guiding us, and then this idea of destination stewardship, I want you to keep all of that in mind as we continue to talk about each of those things. So next up, you're gonna see, or if you probably have already seen, there's been quite a few changes in the past 8 months. 8 months is how long I've been at the helm of the organization. And yes, we have had a lot of things that we have had to bob and weave and to make big decisions. And we're doing it with a lot of thought. And the idea is, there were these risk assessments and these audits. And so we have to address those, and we're continuing to address them. We're reporting our progress regularly at the TDC board meetings. We are embarking on a very big strategic planning initiative. Some of you have probably already been involved in that. If you haven't yet, there are still opportunities, and so we want to talk to you about that. We have new staff members. You may be wondering, who do I talk to at the TDC? Who's doing what these days? And so we have a bunch of different areas that we've increased our staff members. And so whether that's finance and grants and marketing, PR, social media, sales, technology, and partnerships, we have some really talented folks, and they're here in the Keys, which has been a wonderful thing as well. And then agencies. So this is probably another big thing that you've heard about is we have all new agencies. We went through a very extensive RFP process, which stands for Request for Proposals. It's very government-based, very stringent, and we had dozens and dozens of agencies apply to work with us. And through that process, there are these agencies that we now have. So Starmark, they're based in Fort Lauderdale. They are an advertising agency. Turner PR, they have an office in Miami as well as New York and other places. They are public relations. MMGY Global has offices all over the world, and they are building the website. And then Overseas Media Group, who you know and love, they're the same folks that do Keys Weekly. They are doing our social media and webcams. So it's a killer combination of local, regional, and international folks who are going to help us go into the next era of what it looks like to promote tourism in the Florida Keys. And then if anybody wants to go deeper into these things, because we don't have time for it today, I just want to acknowledge them. Please come to a TDC board meeting. They're online and they're open to the public, or a DAC meeting. So that's where we really go into the deep dive of our operations, our finances, staffing. You get to hear from a lot of the different staff members. So I just want to invite you at any moment from the public, if you'd like to come to those meetings, or if you want to attend on Zoom, you're more than welcome to join us. So that brings us to our strategic planning initiative. So the idea is we're building a 3-year strategic plan for our destination. We are looking at goals and initiatives that align that destination stewardship concept. So what do we do to boost quality of life for our residents, and how do we do it in a holistic way? How do we spend dollars wisely and transparently? And so we need your help. There's a QR code on this page. I would love it if you have not taken our survey yet to scan it and to take the survey. It's open, I guess, for 10 more days, but if you don't mind getting it done, and look, it is a little bit of your time. It's not just one of these quick and easy, check a box, 2-minute surveys. It's very extensive, and it asks about all different parts of the quality of life for residents and visitors alike. So if you don't mind taking the time to help us, we need your input. We can't build this strategic plan without the input of our stakeholders and the folks that want to help guide the future, and this is your chance to do that. If there's anybody who wants to go in even deeper, we are doing a mix of interviews and focus groups, and we really hope that all of our DAC members are participating in that in particular. We're doing a workshop for the TDC board that will be in person, and the idea is that we want to release this report so you'll see everything that we've been working on by the end of the summer, and you'll see the progress that we've made. So again, I'll put this QR code up at the end as well, but we're really hoping to get your input. So we also need your support. So some of you, or many of you, probably heard that we were very surprised a few weeks ago when we heard that in the House, so of the Florida legislature, that there were a few bills that would essentially eliminate tourism promotion and eliminate TDCs altogether. So this is where we're at. I'm going to take you through this a little bit. I'm going to tell you where we're at right now with all of this. So essentially, the session was supposed to end on Friday, on May 2nd. But there's a total of 16 bills that had not had the chance to be negotiated behind closed doors between the Senate and the House. House Bill 7033 is one of them. There was another bill that was going to eliminate tourism promotion dollars. That one is not being heard anymore, so that one's dead on arrival. So essentially, the legislature is taking a break this week. They will be back May 12th, so next Monday, and then I believe they have until June 6th. And we've heard that the Senate doesn't really have the stomach to eliminate or redirect tourism development taxes. But we don't know. There's a lot of things that happen in politics behind closed doors, and we're hoping and we're thinking that this is going to be positive for us. And I'm going to take you through all the reasons why we think it's important to keep that funding. You see some of those stats on your screen. Tourism in Florida sustains over 2 million jobs. If it didn't exist, we talked about that number on the screen just a few slides back. $11,474 is how much each resident, or each household, would have to pay in Monroe County to replace the money that tourism brings in. And then I think this is a really important stat too, that every $1 invested in tourism marketing returns up to $3.27 in tax revenue. And then we constantly cite to Colorado and what happened in 1993. I came from Colorado before I came here. I was a CEO of Visit Estes Park, which is the gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park. And it is a study that still, even in Colorado, we're constantly talking about then. And even though this happened in 1993, what would happen is they lost year over year over $2 billion yearly. It wasn't until decades that they could catch up with the market share that they lost. And it's the same reason why you think of, why does Coca-Cola advertise? Why do big brands advertise at the Super Bowl and spend millions of dollars on it? You have to compete for people's attention. People have choices. So whether they're coming to the Florida Keys, or they're going to the Bahamas, or they're going to Puerto Rico, or they're going to Fort Lauderdale, or any other place, if we're not telling them to come, they may go spend their money somewhere else. But it's not just about spending money on the marketing. It's the fact that the way the TDC is set up, and we talked about those two, the way the pennies are divided and the DAX, is that a lot of that money is invested right back into the community, and we're going to talk about that as well. So I had our team pull a few numbers for you. And so you'll see here in the last 5 years, tourists paid for over $4 million in marine and coral restoration, almost $12 million in beach-related funding, $8 million in arts and culture, and $7.5 million in fishing. So this doesn't happen everywhere, by the way, that we reinvest a significant amount of funds that tourists generate back into the community. It's about this concept of destination stewardship. And you know what? It's on me and it's on the TDC to do a better job of communicating that with our residents so that they do understand that so much of what we do is for quality of life. So we need to do a better job communicating it, and we need your help. We need your help as ambassadors in the community to also communicate that. And then, this idea of property taxes. Yes, they're high. Yes, I get it. Yes, it's frustrating. And it's interesting to see what the Florida legislature is going to do about that. But it doesn't match up money-wise. If 1.8 billion is collected statewide from tourists and 16 billion is collected statewide in property taxes, that doesn't offset the cost of the property taxes. And I think there are other unique ways that can be done. And I think that's still a great conversation. And what I'm hearing, and this is hearsay, so please don't quote me on this, what I'm hearing is that's kind of what the Senate is telling the House. Like, go back, create a committee, look at different ways that we can address the property tax issues, but please don't take our tourism dollars. And that's where my fingers are crossed with this, but it doesn't mean we can just sit back and wait and see what happens. We still need to be communicating the issues. And then hopefully by the beginning of June, we'll know where we stand. Here's the thing, is we're not just dealing with issues in Florida. We have international issues too. Political and economic sentiment is an important part of the decision-making process of how people are going to travel. So what we're seeing from this study that was done by Longwoods in April is that 42% of American travelers say that whatever's going on in politics, it affects their travel decisions. And so they're looking at us, and they're looking at us as a country to see what's going on. And then 31% report that airfare prices greatly impact their travel plans. Of course, 42% think that travel expenses are going to continue to rise. And so it all comes down to the fact that everyone has choices. And so what are we looking at when it comes to our biggest international travel market? That's Canada. So this sentiment study just came out. We know they want to travel. So 4 in 5 Canadians, that's 80% almost, they're going to travel in the next 6 months. And then almost 40%, they are still going to come to the United States, or they've already booked their trip. But at the same time, we're seeing numbers that say 60% of Canadians say that what's going on in politics makes them less likely to visit. And then 36% of them did have a trip, but they've now canceled it. And then some are saying that they're going to postpone their upcoming trips. And they're looking at other options besides the United States of places where they could choose to travel. And then, what is making them have these thoughts? Of course, the ideas of tariffs, which have come and gone, and then up and down. And we constantly have to kind of watch that. Political statements by leaders. We just have to watch all of this because Canada is an important market for us. We're also looking at international flight reductions into both Miami and Fort Lauderdale airports. So we're looking at fewer flights when comparing the airline schedules for the end of March against what people had planned in January, flying between Canada and MIA. So there has been reduced seat capacity. And then looking forward, that capacity is continuing to look low as we're going into the summer months. And the reductions are even bigger for Fort Lauderdale. We were seeing an 18% drop in seat capacity in April, and then same pretty big drops going into June. And so with the fact that the number of flights from Canada and to the US are down, not as much as the Florida traffic is. So we're looking at all of these stats to try to figure out how do we best spend our marketing dollars, knowing that we might or likely will have a drop in the international market, and how can we optimize what we're doing to figure those pieces out? I want to show to you another study too. This is from MMGY. They're saying that US travelers are undeterred by tariffs and recession talk. So this is interesting. So we just talked about the international travelers, and yes, they're having some issues about what they want to do. But for the US travelers, they're planning to travel. 83% are still planning to travel this year. 70% plan to travel in the next 6 months. Some are adjusting their plans. They're not canceling them, so they're staying closer to home. They're choosing domestic over international. They're looking for cheaper options. They might be shortening their trips, and they don't know that they're going to feel welcome abroad. Why is that important for us to think about as well? Well, you know as well as I know that COVID was an incredible time period for Florida destinations. It was the same for Colorado mountain destinations where we saw more domestic travelers stay at home. So what we want to look at is we know that we have a very strong domestic travel market. It accounts for the majority of our business. Then if we're spending our marketing dollars shoring that up in our drive market as we go into summer, which we know is really important, then can that help balance out what we may tend to lose from an international standpoint? So these are all really important things that we need to think about. If we know that folks, even when things are a little bit stressful, they're still going to spend. And then we know the folks that are still going to spend usually have a higher income base. And it just so happens that we have a pretty high average daily rate. It costs a lot of money to stay in a hotel in any of the keys. So that Kelly will go into a deeper dive into that as well. But I think that's a positive sign for us. So competition is fierce. So we've got, the attack on TDCs in Florida, we've got international sentiment, and we've got, political upheaval. And that's not a political statement one way or the other. It's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. So despite these headwinds, we have to focus on strategic response and planning. So we keep doing what we're doing. We keep transforming the TDC. We know that Monroe County remains resilient during this time period, especially when it comes to higher income visitors. And then we emphasize data-driven marketing. We emphasize the launching of a brand new website and a new CRM, which is how we're going to communicate with our stakeholders. We're looking for ways to enhance our conservation efforts, preserving our natural resources under that umbrella of destination stewardship. We want to do a better job of collaborating with you all, and we need your input and support. So everyone's got an opinion, and we want to know what it is as we do the strategic planning going forward. Now, pop quiz. I did show this number to you in the presentation. Were you paying attention? If you weren't, don't worry, because Kelly's going to take this next. But if in the chat, tell me, how much do visitors spend annually in Monroe County? There's a little test here, so let's see how you do. And then as you're putting that into the chat, I'm very excited to introduce Kelly. She's going to start by talking to us about Dean Runyan and the economic impact study that they created for us. And then Kelly, are you ready to take it away?
I am. Thank you. Thank you. And I see in the chat that some people were paying attention because some have that number spot on. So I'm going to share with you the economic impact study that we worked with Dean Runyan on. And I'm seeing in the chat here, we've got 1.2 billion, 16 billion, 1,376 billion. Now, come on. Who's putting that down? But many of you said $3.5 billion. And Carol will show you on the next slide. That's exactly what visitors spent in 2023 in the Florida Keys and Key West. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll let you know the methodology that was used during this study. We're going to talk about travel-related spending, which is money spent by the visitors while they're in the Keys. That includes lodging, dining, attractions, travel arrangements, even like flights or tours. And we're going to talk about direct impacts and secondary impacts. So the direct is that first layer of benefits. So the local jobs, the wages, the taxes created directly by that spending. So we're talking hotel servers, bartenders, and then also secondary impacts. So those are the ripple effects that are in the broader economy. So as tourism businesses buy supplies and employees spend their wages locally, that results in even more spending, jobs, and taxes in the community. So we've got the direct impacts and also those secondary impacts. So we're going to also talk about visitor spending by commodity purchased. So as you would expect, visitors spent the most on accommodations, 1.7 billion on accommodations in 2023. It's a slight decline compared to 2022. But if you look at that bright green bar, that was our last new normal that, we were all comparing everything to 2019. Spending on accommodations is $566 million more in 2023 than it was in 2019. And as you can expect, the next highest is food service. So our restaurants, our bars, followed by arts and entertainment. So also food stores like Publix, local transportation and gas, retail sales, and visitor air flight. And then by accommodation type, you're going to see a couple of acronyms on here. So STVR, that's your short-term vacation rental, like your Airbnb, your VRBOs. And then VFR, private home, that's visiting friends and relatives. So that always throws me. But these types of accommodations not only drive the bulk of our local tourism economy, but they also generate the most in our tourism development tax revenue. And that helps fund things like beach cleanups, workforce housing, and cultural programs. I know someone dropped a question earlier in the chat about workforce housing. I will let you know, I'm not sure if many people know, but this year in particular, we, from our visitors, have $35 million earmarked for workforce housing. So that's an important piece that we should all know is happening.
Yeah. Kelly, there was one other question in the chat while you're answering a question that said, does the number, I think the 3.5 billion include snowbirds and tourists?
It depends on how, but yes, it's not just overnight visitation. It's snowbirds. That piece was direct spending. So yes, they're direct and indirect, but snowbirds absolutely are included. Visitor spending by island district, not surprising. Key West is the majority of the countywide visitor spending generated in Key West, over 1.3 billion in 2019 and 1.8 billion in 2023, followed by Key Largo, Marathon, Almirada, and the Lower Keys. So when we talk about travel related, direct travel generated earnings, in 2023, tourism in the Keys generated over $1 billion in direct earnings. So that's wages paid to local workers because of our visitor spending. And the vast majority of those earnings, nearly 80%, the biggest piece of that pie you're looking at right there, come from jobs in accommodations and food services. So also not surprising. So that means hotels, restaurants, vacation rentals. They're not just serving visitors, they're providing jobs and income for thousands of local residents. And most of these jobs, about 73% of them, are in the food service sector, like we said. So, I'm sorry. When they come to the Keys, they're not just spending money, they're directly supporting the people who live and work here. Just a second. Sorry. So the strength of our tourism economy directly impacts how many locals can find and keep steady work while they're here. So let's take a look at the tax generated receipts. And direct travel generated, I'm sorry, I think we're on the wrong slide. Can you go one more? Okay, thank you. This one. Direct travel generated tax revenue was nearly 305 million in 2023. And importantly, 41% of that tax that you'll see in the green bar there stayed local, helping fund things like beach maintenance, infrastructure, workforce housing, emergency services, all without increasing taxes on our residents. So tourism significantly offsets the cost of public services, meaning residents get better infrastructure and amenities without bearing that full tax burden. And then there's a lot to look at on this next slide, but I won't read it all to you, but really what you need to know is that the tourism industry doesn't just generate revenue when a visitor books a hotel. It generates this chain reaction of local spending and tax contributions. And these taxes are critical to keeping up our roads, to protecting our environment, and supporting housing and public safety without relying more heavily on local households. And this next slide it's got a lot going on, so I'm not going to read all of it here, but what this is showing you, this slide shows how the local tax revenue from tourism is distributed. The largest portion, 35%, comes from the tourism development tax, which Kara talked to you earlier about, which visitors pay when they stay in hotels or vacation rentals. And the other key contributors include sales tax from visitor purchases, property taxes from tourism-supported businesses, and employment-based taxes. And together, these taxes fund many of the services and amenities that we all rely on. So again, these taxes reduce the burden of residents, like by funding services like beach upkeep, cultural programming, park maintenance, and emergency responses. And state taxes. When visitors come to the Keys, they don't just support local businesses. They also contribute significantly to the state tax revenue. They help fund highways, safety programs, our public schools. Even if they only visit for a few days, they're contributing to the state taxes. So without tourism, the state would need to find that money elsewhere, meaning higher taxes, fewer services for our residents. So local, state, and tax per resident household, I think Kara mentioned this earlier, without our visitors, locals would have an additional $11,500 tax burden. So that's a savings to the local residents. And then this last slide I found really, really interesting and compelling. And I'm a data geek. Kara told you, sorry, but I thought this was really, really interesting. So since 2018, here's that acronym again, STVR, short-term vacation rentals has grown by over 1,300 units. But here's the silver lining to that. At the same time, we've seen a decline in seasonal homes. So seeing that decline, those vacation or seasonal homes were empty, right? They sat empty for much of the year. So that means when more homes are being rented by visitors, they're at least being occupied, generating income and contributing to that tax rental. So that the shift may help ease some of the housing pressure because those units were already not part of the year-round housing supply. So in other words, we've seen an increase in the visitor accommodations, but not necessarily at the direct expense of our workforce housing. So I think this is a really compelling slide.
Kelly, we've got one question on the short-term rentals, asking if this information is focused on the permitted rentals or all of them in the destination.
All of them in the destination. And we all know there's a discrepancy between what's permitted, what's licensed. But when Dean Runyan looked at the whole picture, it looked at the broader pie. And again, there'll be a link at the end to the actual full study, and you can look at the full methodology. If you want to dive a little deeper, there's going to be a lot of many QR codes at the end that you can take a look at if you want to dive in a little deeper, or you can reach out to me directly if you want to talk through a few of these things. Now we're going to move on to the Rockport study, and this is a visitor profile study that we do every year. We have boots on the ground going from Key West all the way up to Key Largo. We intercept our visitors in a variety of different locations, a variety of different days of the week, a variety of different times of day, so that we're getting a really good sample of our visitor. And then we also do a survey post-stay. So we're doing online intercepts and post-stay intercepts. So we're getting a good representation of our overnight visitors. So I have a question for all of you. Quick poll here. We want to know, which 3 states do the majority of your guests or your customers travel from? Drop your answers in the chat. We want to know, what 3 states do you see your business coming from? New York, Massachusetts, Philly, New York, Florida, Montana. Interesting. New York, Ohio, Florida, Georgia, Florida, Georgia. Florida, Florida, Florida. Yes, New York, Virginia, Illinois. Shout out to Illinois, New York, Michigan, Ohio, Florida out of county, New Jersey, New Jersey. Okay, this is great.
You missed all the Texas. There's a lot of
There was a bunch of Texas. I'm sorry. Yes, yes, yes.
Going very quickly, yeah.
Yes, yes. All right, so let's dig into this data, and I will cover some of this information for you. Again, we're going to give you the highlights of this study. 82% of our visitors are from the US, mainly from Florida, New York, and California. Our average visitor age is 43. We know we have a high household income, and 60% of all our visitors earn 100,000 K plus per year. They spend $1,376 on average per trip. The majority of that is on their lodging and food. And that is exactly what we saw in Dean Runyan. The high number was lodging, followed by food and beverage. And the average stay is 5.6 nights. Now, many of you, let's say you're in Key West or Marathon, you may say, well, I don't see that long length of stay, 5.6. Well, sometimes it's broken up over the destinations. We see a lot of people driving down. They're hitting Key Largo, Marathon, Almirada, well, back order. Key Largo, Almirada, Marathon, Lower Keys, and Key West. So that length of stay is not just in one location. It's across the island chain. So how did folks use the internet tools to plan their trip? In 2024, visitors were much more likely to use internet tools, and they, as a traveler, used online review sites the most, like TripAdvisor, iGo, YouGo. They also used social sites like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. They came to our Florida Keys official website, which is fantastic, fla-keys.com. Some looked at a blog and some just didn't know. It's overwhelming. I've looked all over the internet. I'm not sure what's popping up at me, where that actually came from. But the majority of our visitors are likely to use these internet tools to book their rooms. And importantly, digital media is driving travel decisions. So digital media played a significantly larger role in inspiring travel to the Keys in 24. Their visitors were influenced by online reviews, which we just said, social media, TV, and travel shows when deciding to visit. And they also relied on digital resources, review platforms, social media sites, and again, our official website for their trip planning.
Oops.
Whoops. Now, what method?
Sorry.
Got a little too much coffee. Now, the method of accommodation that people were, how are people making their reservations? Now, this was surprising to me. I'm formally on the hotel side of things. I did almost 20 years on the hotel side before moving to the TDC, and I really thought people go direct to hotels first. They go direct to the property and book their reservation. But in 2024, almost 50%, 48% made their reservation through a travel site like Expedia or Travelocity. They were more likely to make reservations through the property website in 2024 than they were in 2023. But the majority made them through those third parties. Some used a travel agent, some picked up the phone and made a direct call to the property, which we're not seeing as much anymore. I don't know. I like to talk to a person sometimes, but some didn't make an advance reservation at all. So we have our walk-ins, right? And some booked during their last visit to the Keys. So we know those folks are coming for boat races and Fantasy Fest or New Year's, right? Those are the ones that are booking in advance because those book up. So let's take a look at this next slide. And we want to know what their primary accommodations were. Hotel, motel, resort. So more likely than not, most visitors are going to stay in a hotel, motel, or a resort. Seasonal vacation rentals accounted for 16% of the stays, while staying in traditional bed and breakfast made up 10%, and 7% stayed with family and friends, which was the greatest increase actually from 2023. Campgrounds and RV parks are still a piece of the pie at 5%. And 1% indicated another type of accommodation not listed, maybe a boat. Not sure. This was interesting. Sightseeing and adventures are starting to overtake bars in popularity. So in our survey, sightseeing and wildlife experiences surged in popularity in 2024. The number of tourists engaging in visiting attractions rose by 4.9%, but the interest in wildlife viewing saw an even larger jump of 10% when asked to describe their reason for visitors to visiting the Keys. People cited more frequently that they wanted adventure, a better climate, and the appeal of exploring a new destination. So these are some other things people participated in while they were here: dining out, taking part in beach activities. So they're spending their money while dining out, and then they're saving their money relaxing on the beach. They're going to sightsee attractions. They're going out to bars. They're viewing that wildlife. And you see that jump there in that viewing of wildlife year over year. We know they're boating, they're fishing, they're snorkeling, but they're also seeing cultural events, visiting museums, going to spas, coming for weddings. And the primary reasons and experience that drive visitors to the Keys, this is just over and over and over again what people are saying. I just need to relax. I just need to escape. I just need a vacation. The primary purpose people are coming, they're coming for a vacation. Some are visiting friends and family. Some are coming for business. Very, very few are coming for a convention or a meeting. The majority of our visitors are just coming for a vacation and they just want to relax. And what was their primary mode of transportation to the Keys? You see these big slices of the pie over here on this chart. And in 2024, over half, 52% of the people visited in the Keys flew into Florida. Of those, 50% flew into Miami, 39 flew into Key West, and 6% flew into a different airport. And again, visitors were 4% points less likely to drive their own personal vehicle or RV, while being 4.9 percentage points more likely to fly into Miami than they were in 2023. So interestingly, though, the visitors to the Florida Keys were 6.6 percentage points less likely to be Florida residents compared to the previous year. So fewer visitors from Florida. The largest increased traveler came from New York, California, and Illinois. I saw some of you say Illinois earlier. And that shift in visitor demographic may explain the decline in those driving personal vehicles and the rise in those flying into Miami or other Florida airports. So that makes sense, right? So this is really, really important. And I think I'm really happy to see this slide. So Rockport uses something they call a Net Promoter Score, or NPS, and it gauges the visitor satisfaction and the likelihood to recommend NPS are both very strong and have improved since 2024. And NPS surpassed 70 and is currently at 71.6, a 4-point increase since 2023. And average net promoter scores are typically less than 40%. So this is great that our visitors are really satisfied when they're coming, especially when we're talking about, and I'll get into this a little later in the slides, but those average daily rates that we know people are paying to stay here are very high. So we know they're coming, we know they're spending, but they're also very satisfied. So with that, I will end the Rockport study and transfer the presentation over to Heidi Barfels, and she will go into campaign performance and strategic alignment. And again, if you want the QR code to that full study, it'll be at the end, so you can take a look if you have more questions.
Well, thank you. So good morning, everybody. For those that don't know me yet, my name is Heidi Barfels. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for the TDC. Today, Kara and Kelly invited me to talk to you all about how we take data like the visitor profile study and the lodging reports you'll be seeing later on and apply it to our own data-driven marketing strategies. So one of the most important ways we ensure our marketing is effective and accountable is by grounding it in data and research. So that means that we're not guessing or hoping that our message is sticking. We're making informed decisions that allow us to reach the right audiences at the right time with the right message. So how do we do that? First, as we're building our annual marketing plan, which is actually what we're starting to do right now, we look at the research and the data. That means we are working to understand who our visitors are. We're looking at those demographics. Where are they coming from? Those markets. Like this information you all gave us today is also really interesting to see how it compares. We're thinking about what are they interested in doing, right? So we saw they're interested in relaxation and nature, adventure. We look at all that. We look at how are they planning their trips. So Kelly just said they are looking more to digital these days. So we look at all that. And then that helps us define our target audiences, prioritize certain markets, and just make sure that everything we're doing is going to bring the most impact to the community. So what that means is that the data is helping us shape not just the creative and messaging, but where we're spending our money and when. So information on booking windows, length of stay, demographics, all that is playing into what we do. And it doesn't just stop at our annual plans or launch of a campaign. We are constantly optimizing what we're doing. Kara mentioned that earlier. And what that means is that we're looking at our campaign performance weekly. That means we adjust our spend, our placements, our creative, and to make sure that we're really maximizing how we're spending our dollars and that it's working as effectively as it can be. If we see early signs of a softening in visitation or occupancy, that means we can react quickly and drive demand when it's needed the most. Or if we see an emerging market or something that's interesting to us, we can start to place a little bit more of an effort into that category. So what are some examples of that, especially to what it relates to now? If we're looking at a booking window shortening, perhaps we hear about that happening during shoulder seasons, times of economic uncertainty. That means that we can pivot our strategy to focus on last minute travelers with more immediate calls to action, maybe some enticing deals, talk about upcoming events to really drive more visitation in the short term. We also do paid social media, what I want to tell you about, and that moves even more quickly. And we monitor that almost daily. And that's just a good channel for us to be able to make adjustments and reach our audiences basically in real time. And just to sum it all up for you, that means that through our marketing that we are doing for you, our community, we are a data-driven destination. Our marketing strategies are informed by these insights that you're seeing today, and that helps us remain nimble, efficient, and aligned with what the community needs most. All right, that's all I got. Back over to Kelly.
And if I get myself off mute, I can go ahead and dig into these lodging trends for you here. Now, I know many of you on the call are on the hotel side, but for those of you who aren't, I'm going to share some data with you that, as you see on the screen, is called RevPAR. So when we look at people staying in our accommodations, we want to know what the average daily rate they're paying is, what the occupancy is of the hotels. But RevPAR actually balances both. It tells you how efficiently the hotel is making money on the rooms that they have from its inventory of rooms. So it tells you the bigger picture. So if you take a look at Monroe County average RevPAR through the fiscal year, we've got October through March to report on right now. And fiscal year 25 is pacing closely through 24 through March. So if you look at that yellow line, that's 2025 that we're looking at. 2024 remains the strongest year overall, but for Monroe County, RevPAR is showing a steady year-over-year growth with some strong winter peaks, and we're close to exactly where we were in 2024. February and March fell just a little bit short for the county. And the next slide shows us the average RevPAR for Key West. And Key West shows a strong seasonal pattern. There's consistent peaks in February and March that we would expect. 25 is pacing just below 24 through March, but it remains in line with recent performances. So nothing shocking or striking here. 22 continues to stand out as the highest performing year of all months again. And as we would expect, the summer months remain the softest period, consistent with some historical trends. Now, this next slide here shows you market comparison with RevPAR and occupancy and ADR. So the first column, you're seeing occupancy, and we've got not just our DACs, Florida Keys, Islamorada, Key Largo, and Key West. This study, I should say, is from Smith Travel. And the reason we don't have the lower keys represented as its own here is because there has to be a certain number of properties that actually report to Smith Travel so that they can aggregate it for us, and you're not actually seeing what this hotel or that hotel is actually doing. So it keeps the anonymity. So we don't have enough properties in DAC 2 to be represented here, but with an 86.4% occupancy rate, the Florida Keys rank among the top in the state, just behind Key West. Key West has the highest occupancy, and then Key Largo. And the region's average daily rate of $462 contributes a strong RevPAR of $399. We outperform all major markets. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Orlando, we outperform everything. If you see the highest, the darkest blue line is Key West. So Key West is really leading RevPAR for the entire state. And just like hotels that report to Smith Travel, hotels that report to TravelClick, we have a report on future looking occupancies, ADRs, and RevPARs. We can see here on the big graph, the bottom line, the bottom graph, the black line shows you the year-over-year ADR change. So we see ADR is holding steady. ADR is consistently holding steady. It's straight across there. But where you see the RevPAR, the red line, the reserved occupancy, the green line, dipping in August and September, we've looking at these booking patterns. They're consistent with prior years, but this graph suggests an opportunity for last minute demand and some tactical recovery. And if you look at the tiny graph at the top, the line going up and down, that represents an 8-week booking curve. So across here, you see this line angling up. 50% of our bookings in 2024 come in within that 8-week period. So even though we're seeing these occupancies dipping and that RevPAR dipping towards August and September, we're still well within that booking window for recovery. And with that, I will turn this back over to Kara.
Kelly, great job. We're so lucky to have you, and Heidi as well, and Jean. Thank you for going through and responding to people's comments throughout. I can't say enough about the team that we have at the TDC. They do a fantastic job, and so really, really appreciative of all of their work. So we've got some upcoming things that we're excited about. So we want to know, like, if you thought that this webinar was helpful to you. We want to know if you think that there's something that we could do better. We want to know as well. We do have a great partnership with Tourism Economics. We have a dashboard and we have these monthly summaries that are going to be coming out. We just kind of feel like the more data that we can not only take in ourselves, but share with you, the better that we can all be in our business decisions. So if there's something that you're not seeing from us that you want, let us know. And Kelly is fantastic at working with different companies to try to figure out information, and we can try to figure that out for you. So we're excited to be sharing as much data as possible with you. And hey, if you want to knock yourself out on some QR codes, I don't know if you have enough time to get them all, but if you do a screenshot of the whole screen, and then you can go back through and do it. Or if that's like way too much effort, just email me or email Kelly or somebody on staff, and we'll make sure that you get all of these studies so that if anybody wants to do a deeper dive, you are more than welcome to. And then all of this is going to be available on our website. And of course, we're going to send out this presentation to everyone as well. So I just don't want to close this out without going back to some of those key numbers so that they are burned in your brain. There's not another pop quiz. You already got through the questions, but just remember, more than 19,000 local jobs rely on tourism. Every $1 in marketing returns $3.27 in tax revenue. We spend, everything from workforce housing. We should have had a slide in here for that $35 million because that's a huge chunk of change. So we'll have to make sure that we update that for the future. The fact that $35 million of tourist spending going to workforce housing. And then we talked about all of those numbers for reef care and beaches and everything. And then don't forget the line about Colorado. Why am I reminding you of all of this? Because it can't just be me that's saying it. We need you all to be ambassadors as well for our biggest economic driver. So I want to try to burn some of these stats into your brain so that as you're asked about it as well, you'll be armed with some information. So I wanted to leave you with a few key contacts. This isn't everybody, but if there's anybody that you wanted to talk to more, Heidi's email is up here. She can set you up with a meeting with Shireen too. They are the ones that are organizing all of the advertising efforts, our public relations team. You see Kelly's email on there, our community and partnerships. We're in the middle of grants and sponsorships, so be on the lookout for what's going to go on with that over the next 3 months. And then we've got a lot going on with the website. Jean has her hands full as we completely build a website from scratch. So appreciate her leadership with that. If anybody wants to see what you can do to help boost summer, we are doing some last minute co-op opportunities. You see Shireen's email on there too. Copy Heidi on that if you want to, and that way they can walk you through. Please also mark your calendar for a hurricane prep workshop on Thursday, May 29th on 10 a.m. That's also via Zoom. If you want sign up information for that, please contact Julia. And then this is the scan to take the survey QR code. That's for anybody who hasn't taken the survey yet for strategic planning. If you want to guide the future of tourism for Florida Keys, this is your quickest and easiest way to do that. Although I think it is probably 20 minutes of your time. So get a cup of coffee and power through that if you don't mind. And that's it, folks. So we really appreciate your time and attention today. I think we got this done in an hour, and we had booked you for an hour and a half. So I hope that's a gift of 30 minutes back into your day. And thank you so much. If there's anything that we can do for you, please reach out and let us know. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.